Whoops, I lost you guys.
I don't think so.
I see you.
All
You're all
right,
there.
we are live. Welcome, everyone. Apologies for running a little late. I'm trying to run two of these at once, which is a new challenge. So the Concom is also meeting right now. So with that being said, I'll call the meeting to order. The Board of Selectmen at 6:36 p.m. Begin with, we'll run through a couple slides for the audience with some pointers and assistance on how to connect and raise their hand if they'd like to speak or ask questions in the chat. Brian will. All of these meetings are being recorded, and all comments and questions are also part of the recording. We're using a product called GoToWebinar. Attendees can join just by phone in a listen-only mode, or can join through the app online or mobile device or through your computer. And then you have an opportunity to ask questions either via the audio connection as shown here, or via the chat window where it says enter a question for the staff. And as noted here, please be patient with this format. It's not quite the same as raising your hand in the audience of a meeting room, so we will get to the questions as soon as we can if we're taking questions for that topic. All right, without further ado, we will get underway. So our first topic, continuing discussion around our town's response to COVID-19. There's a lengthy list of items and updates that we've posted on the website, as well as circulated internally to the staff. I'll briefly go through the highlights. If there's any questions or comments, please let me know. Governor Baker extended the emergency order for non-essential businesses and organizations to close to the public, and the stay-at-home order through until May 4th. So as of late last week, we also extended our stay and non-essential orders as to the same date until May 4th to remain in line with the state's recommendations. So the Irving Elementary School, the Irving Senior and Community Center, the Irving Public Library, the Irving Recreation Office, and all Irving playgrounds, and the Irving Town Hall are all closed to the public. The annual town meeting and annual town elections were postponed, as we discussed in our last meeting. Anything Goes was canceled. Public safety and public works and essential staff continue to report and be available by appointment via phone and email. Primarily remote, occasionally a meeting if absolutely necessary can be arranged. General government, we're still town clerk, financial, treasurer, accountant, etc. Planning board. Most of the staff, even if they're not reporting to work, are attempting to be available as much as they can via work from home, and at least responding to emails, voicemails, calls as they can. The latest from, I had a discussion with the Recreation Commission late last week, made the decision with the recommendation of the National Parks and Rec to close the playgrounds. So those areas where contact is there's high contact and risk of transference of infection. So the basketball courts, for example, the play structures, those sorts of things are all closed. We have signage up at the parks. We also have wrapped those areas in tape indicating that they shouldn't be used. We're still encouraging green space use and practicing social distancing in the fields or out in the state forests and other recreation areas where people can be separated. Spring t-ball and baseball have been canceled. Summer park is being reviewed, so as further decisions are made around that, they will post those online, and we will also post any announcements as as time goes on and those evolve. I'm just kind of skimming here, but if you have any questions, please let me know. There's also an essential business listing. If people have any questions on whether or not their business is considered essential and can remain open, covid19.biz at mass.gov. You can email there. General information from the state. If people have questions or concerns, Mass 211 is available for those kind of questions related to COVID. That's a very high level summary of a lot of things that were in the announcement. Any questions, gentlemen?
None.
Any concerns with anything? Anything else that we haven't brought up?
Nope.
Okay. Well, we'll continue to react to any new, recommendations and changes in the situation and keep everyone posted as well as you. Moving on to our second topic, well, I guess I'll jump into this one. I'm not going to jump into the next topic. Sorry. So this act came out, I believe, late last week. It was signed, effective April 3rd. So this allows the municipalities to further extend the annual town meeting date if the state of emergency continues. So this allows a select board to further delay beyond June 30. So should this continue on to that point where we can't gather and readily meet the meeting requirements of an annual town meeting, this act now allows us to delay further beyond June 30. And there's some specific directions on how we would go about that, but should we get to the point where that is a need and we have to do that, we can, utilizing this act. Further on in this act, there's some other things that this allows, which is, with assistance of the moderator also to make these changes. I believe there's a section in here about the elections as well. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, and then there's the appropriations piece too, which is, so should we go beyond June 30, obviously we haven't had the voters authorize the appropriations and the raise and appropriate for FY21. This would allow us to operate at least 1/12 of our 2020 budget per month for as long as the extensions continue for the budget purposes. And then free cash would be available immediately on July 1, should this continue, rather than usually we wait for the undesignated fund balance to be certified, later in the year around October. This would allow it to be available on July 1 from the way I understand it. Brian, feel free to correct me if you and the finance team have read this differently.
That's my current understanding, but it came out after hours on Friday. So I still need to finish going over this with a fine tooth comb with the finance team.
We have a few months should we need to enact something like this to understand it better and understand how it'll affect what we need to do. Hopefully this doesn't come to be, but obviously state and towns need to make preparations just in case we do end up continuing in the current state for longer than the end of the fiscal year. Also the ability to run in a deficit due to the coronavirus situation, COVID-19. Should we do that, it allows us to amortize that deficit for what looks to be three fiscal years to get caught up. So that's another part to this. Let's see what else is there. There's a piece about revolving funds. There's a piece about properties, and then the one that's probably the most pertinent and more near in terms of the calendar is due dates of real and personal property tax bills and exemptions and waivers of interest on certain late payments. So we have a local option to extend the due date on the property tax bills. So moving that to a date not later than June 1 from its current due date. And this is something that the board has the provision to extend. We have asked the tax collector and the treasurer to review this and understand what impacts that may have if we were to extend it. Obviously from operating cash flow, things like that. How would this impact that, and do we have concerns? I believe they could use a little more time to review it, so we may not want to exercise it tonight. And I don't know if you have any different information, but I think that there's a little more time to digest this.
That's correct. Months ago, maybe end of February, proactively, the collector's office has already sent out the second payments, the second bills, knowing that they wouldn't be due until May, just to give folks a little bit longer of a time with them. So the information's already out, and people have already elected to pay early. They've been coming in already. So we don't know how much this type of relief may be needed for folks who have already been paying, but it's definitely an option. And the treasurer, tax collector, and assessor are all in communication, and they said that they could use another week or so to discuss amongst themselves about any implementation questions that may arise, if you are okay waiting a little bit longer to make that decision.
I think it'll give us time as well to digest what that may mean and get their recommendation as well on what concerns that may generate. Obviously, the meaning of this is to help people right now. It's a tough situation for some financially, and the longer this goes on, the worse that can be. So helping to not further that burden by at least waiving interest or extending due dates, et cetera, without late fees. Brian, just for clarification, the excise bills and things like that were due as this all kind of started, this covers those as well, right? If we do a waiver on the interest payments, is that on interest for late payments, is that section C?
That is my understanding. I can ask for a little clearer detail from the tax collector on that, but that was my understanding.
Okay. So I don't believe we have to exercise all the options listed here. We can exercise some or none if we so choose. I think when this first started, one of the first things that everyone voiced was, concerns about payments being due right as we closed the buildings to the public. Now that kind of, unfortunately, the whole country is getting used to this routine of things are closed that are usually open, I think they're finding other avenues to continue to meet deadlines and such, but we may want to look at the interest waiver or the late payment waiver, even if we choose not to extend the tax dates. At least that's my personal feeling. But I think, again, we'll, unless you gentlemen have any questions about any of this or how this works, I probably can't answer them, but we can put them together and get feedback from our team for next week. But at this point, my recommendation would be we'll read through it a little more, digest it, and get feedback from our financial team on what makes sense. And then we can make a decision on whether or not we act on any of these next week.
Sounds good to me.
Just to add, I had one complaint. A citizen who was directed to use the online process to pay taxes didn't like the process, said that they were told that when they started the process online that there would be a fee, but they weren't told what the fee was until they had entered into the process of paying and found the fee to be too high. So just it was brought to my attention that they thought that was an issue. So so we don't really run that service.
Right.
is all that we have that's available to the taxpayers to have another method. Hopefully someday in the future, we will be able to provide that service ourselves and without a tax fee or a fee to use it.
The Mr. Benbury, the issue of a convenience fee is an issue of state law. So the town cannot absorb the transaction fee
Okay.
for the user of that service. When a user chooses to use a credit card, there is a percentage that they use to figure out what the convenience fee is. But
Okay.
if a user decides to use an electronic withdrawal from the checking account, I believe the fee is 25 cents. So some people opt for that option because they find that to be a more reasonable convenience fee.
Okay.
But that the issue is tied to a state law that prevents towns from absorbing that transaction fee when a credit card is used.
Okay.
Yeah, I've used it a few times, and I can say the quote unquote replacement for paying by check in person would be to use the bank transfer option, or ACH, I think it's called, which is only a quarter at least.
Okay.
Much more reasonable fee. That's what I usually exercise because the credit card fees are very high. I would feel the same way if I was trying to pay with a credit card.
Right. Okay.
But I'm gonna
Thank you.
turn my on so it's not so dark. A second. Sorry, there we go. That's a little better. My understanding, should we choose to enact this, then we have to send out this notice to all taxpayers via the mail to let them know of the changes and the extensions. This is a sample. I believe we can. We'll work with council should we choose to do this for what the exact appropriate language and sections that we want to cover, if we choose not to do all of them. All right. Any other questions on that act that we can get answers for? And by we, I mean Brian and his team. All right. Moving on to the next item on the agenda, I don't believe, are we ready to do a library construction FF&E change order deep dive?
I think if you wouldn't mind holding on this for one more week, I know we've sort of pushed this along, but this end of last week and today started to feel like more work again. So I would like the opportunity to work with Barbara and our owner's project manager to reconvene and update where we are. The last time I've had a chance to really sit and work on these numbers was about 4 weeks ago. And then for your next meeting, we can present you with a current status of everything, the final change order requests, and any outstanding issues.
That works for me. And yes, it would actually feel nice to get back to more normal business. But
Right.
But yeah, no, it'd be good to come back to it. But yeah, as soon as you and Barbara and the team, building committee, whoever's working on that, is ready to kind of present where we're at, what's the last open items, what change orders are open, kind of the wrap up items, that would be good.
Okay, we'll make sure we get that ready.
Any updates on the IP mill hazardous materials cleanup project?
I've spoken to your selected contractor and they're excited to start discussing a construction schedule. And we received a little more guidance on Friday from the governor's office and the Department of Labor how construction can continue. So we will be working on getting the contracts finalized and setting up that first construction meeting, and working again, like we discussed last week, with Mass Development to amend our timeline. But everything's looking good.
Excellent. Any questions so far? I don't think we've had any questions from the audience either, correct?
Just a comment that Barbara was responding back, that we do have some correspondence from our project liaison at the MBLC. So we will be working with them this week.
Okay. I'm assuming inquiring kind of on where we're at as well with the current state.
I'm sure.
Okay. All right. The FY 2021 budget draft.
So I need to give you your full draft document, but we haven't changed any numbers from the last time you reviewed the budget. So I'm just working on that narrative piece. So I should have that to you this week as well for approval.
You know, one thing that came to mind, and I know it wasn't in here in the budget draft, and I know we have a little bit of work to do on it, but I believe it kind of came up a little bit before everything with COVID started, and it got lost in the shuffle. But there's been, I think, a pattern I've noticed over the few years of having some sort of breakdown or significant maintenance required with the highway department or even with other vehicles, but especially with the highway equipment every year. And Brian, I think I talked to you briefly about this, about whether it made sense to have a line that was made to handle that, if you will, like increase a maintenance line or something. I believe we had another significant repair this year on a piece of equipment.
That is such a good question.
I'm sorry?
I said, that's such a good question. Give me one second.
Does it ring a bell? I know it feels like it was forever ago. I think it was just about a month ago when it kind of happened, but
It does, and you're absolutely right. In both departments, vehicle maintenance tends to be large budget drivers. The equipment in the highway department is obviously much more specialized, and there's fewer places that can work on those trucks. But both have had expensive line items for that. So what we did this year, to that question, we did add a line to the highway department. We moved money into it this current fiscal year, even though it wasn't part of your budget plan last year. We made it after the budget started, and we broke in some lines from the expense line. So we put a specific vehicle repair and maintenance line of $10,000 into the budget. That sometimes only does a couple repairs, depending on what has been damaged. We don't have a similar line item in the police department, I don't believe. Let me double check.
now is that line item new for 21 and it was unfunded in 20, or was it funded in
wasn't
20?
funded directly in our plan in 20. We added it after the start of the year, and we just broke general expense money out into different lines, so we had a better tracking mechanism for the different types of expenses. The high budget, like all of your budgets a few years ago, were consolidated into one general expense line. And everything was sort of put into that same bucket. And then as we broke out all the other departments, the highway was one of the next logical departments to do that in. So last year, we specifically called out vehicle maintenance as a separate line item, funded at $10,000. You've carried that number again this year. There is actually, now that I said it incorrectly, there is actually a line in the police department budget of $4,000 for cruiser maintenance.
Okay.
Again,
I guess the question, and maybe you don't have the answer right now, but the question wasn't maybe so much that we have the breakout line, but that $10,000 was a shift from a group of expenses last year,
right.
or the current year. If we just funded it at the same going into next year, then there's no increase in it. It's just broken out with its own title, right?
Correct.
And I guess my concern is, I think back when we had the turbos, which was a significant repair a few years back, and I believe there's one this year that just happened towards the end of the snow season. I'd be speculating if I guessed the cost of it, but I'm sure it was $3,000, $5,000, $8,000. It was significant. So I guess the only thought I'm having before we finalize was, do we potentially want to add to that? And maybe it's not the right time to do it, when we're talking about finalizing the ATM tonight. But I just wanted to bring it up and make sure we did talk about it, and maybe we evaluate it, do some analysis, and either add to it at a special or next year for FY22. Remember to maybe increase that if needed based on the historical pattern. But I just wanted to bring it up before I forgot. That's
No,
with
that's
everything.
It's a reoccurring issue, so that's a fair concern.
And maybe that's not the right line to put it in. Maybe we need a line that is just a general break fix, that we increase a little more to cover those kinds of things, to no matter what department has the break, you know. Just the highway obviously has most equipment, most expensive, so it's more noticeable there probably.
Would you be open to, and I can sort of talk to the town accountant about different options, would you be open to a version of a reserve fund that's specialized for this, or would adding to the existing reserve fund make sense?
Well, now that you bring that up, maybe it's not even necessary, considering we did, you know, increase the reserve fund to be maybe a better pool for instances like this a few years ago. And I don't think we have yet to have enough unexpected issues to drain that down in a fiscal year in the last couple.
Not yet.
So maybe we're good. Maybe it's just more of something to keep an eye on. And if we see it being a continual problem, we can look at a way to mitigate it.
Okay.
I don't know if you gentlemen have any other opinion or thoughts.
I think it's something that we should keep an eye on, as you suggested. I think if I was going to go in either direction, I tend to like the reserve fund option. I don't think we have utilized it exactly in that way, and maybe we should a little bit more.
I agree with Bill.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point, because if you put it in one budget or another, now it's tied to that group, and this is something where it could be in any given department, so that it'd be better to have it more accessible. So it's a good point.
Right.
Okay. All right. So we'll target trying to have a budget, final budget draft to review, document to review next week. Is that realistic, Brian?
I'm gonna give it my all.
Okay. Well, we'll keep.
If things continue to stay as calm as they've been in the end of last week, beginning of today, there's a fair chance to have, it's still going to be a draft, but a more polished version with all the updated charts, and trying to give you an example of what an expense over time looks like for every division in the budget we could discuss. The one thing I am going to need help with is your budget message. So maybe that's something I can collaborate on with you this week on a draft of.
Okay, sounds good. And I think we have a little bit more time given the moved out date for the ATM. So if we need to wait another week, we will.
And we did verify that the printer that we use is open, and still willing to work with us. So we've got that resource.
Excellent. Review of the annual town meeting warrant draft, which is a 99% proof here, right?
Except we added that new bylaw.
99%.
Yes, we're getting it. So all of the changes that you reviewed last week have been accepted. So those things are now in black font, and the red font will show you all of the things that have changed from last week, based on the decisions that you made with the finance committee, including their votes. And then the new bylaw that I'm recommending, or at least presenting for your consideration, obviously word smith it the way that you believe is appropriate, to address the town meeting, town election, and the term of elected officials, as we discussed. So the date has been updated to Wednesday, June 17th, as we discussed. Agenda's been updated. So the town election has been moved to Monday, June 22nd, with election polling hours opening at noon and then closing at 7 p.m. Article 1 has been recommended. So if you remember correctly, at the end of the meeting last time, Finance Committee took a vote to approve all the articles that had been presented to date. So the recommendation was for approval. I put in the vote style. I remember in past years, we've had this conversation with the Finance Committee, and they've had a discussion one way or the other about how they wanted their votes represented. So I presented it in this manner. I can verify with the chair if this satisfies his preference for the way that their vote is presented. It was 3A who were here, and then there was no negative votes, and there was 2 absent. And so you'll see that same vote over and over again as you go through their document. So we had no changes on any of these first 4 articles. We had already adopted the amendment to these elected officials for the current fiscal year, and that has to do with the alignment with the wage study. We had already amended this article last week, and we had put in that additional money here for the Orange Ambulance contract to give you the ability to expand townwide if you choose to. And we also added in to this article, the elementary school article, we had already added in the additional funding. So this now represents that 3.4% increase that you had supported for the school committee. So these have all been updated. That was never changed. The tech school article has been the same one for weeks. Similarly for the water department and the wastewater department. This article also has not changed. This is your recurring annual investments. Yep. So this one, we had taken the initial article apart and put it into a current year appropriation and then a July 1st appropriation for capital projects. Then when you had your conversation about moving the annual town meeting to June 17th, we discussed the reality that that really doesn't give us enough time to conduct the projects. So we discussed putting them back together. So I had given each of those articles a funding source. And so the red font that you see there is showing you the 2 funding sources to get you to the $609,000.
The only comment, just curiosity, don't we already have an account for the carpet replacement?
No. I don't believe, no, out of a grant fund.
Oh, got it.
That's a good question. There will be a planned 3rd phase, and then we'll reuse this account for that 3rd phase when we get to it. So that was the only change there. Everything from that article on has been renumbered to reflect that change. So no changes to the water capital improvement article, no change to the article for wastewater. There's been no change to the revolving accounts, except that 21 is still in here. You got to make that say 21. That's the 2nd week I've caught it and forgotten to do it. I will fix that for you. This is the stabilization fund article that you saw last week. So this is the appropriation of $250,000 of free cash into the stabilization account. You also have an article that appropriates free cash as well as raises and appropriates funds into the general stabilization account. That's in the amount of $273,000, and that is your first payment back into stabilization for the new public library.
My only comment, Brian, is in the article information. We may want to mention that this is the first year, or this is, you know,
First of 5.
one of 5 payments or something. I just don't want it to be confused that this is the full replenishment. This is 1/5 of the, or to say this is the first, you know, of 5 repayments or something like that. From, you know, of 273 plus the other stuff.
Okay. I will add that. So no changes to this one. I gotta change that. I'm glad we read this draft one more time. I should say Board of Selectmen. So this is just for that EV charging station option that we're going to be hopefully doing throughout town this year. So no changes there. This is that article that Mr. Newton had submitted in consideration of the quorum requirements. This is the article that we have submitted by the town clerk for the rescinding of the posting locations. The bylaw created by Mr. Newton for a new clarification of where to post things. And this time it's written as a bylaw. So as we're adding these new articles instead of just votes, we're trying to turn them into bylaws, especially as we work on the codification project. Here is the local adoption article for setting our own fees. Again, no changes to the driveway and curb cuts bylaw that we proposed. And then after this is where I put in the two new proposed articles for your consideration. So the first one is to rescind the town meeting and election dates article that you adopted in 2016. So on June 28, 2016, in Article 10, the town voted unanimously to change the town meeting to the first Monday in May, from the first Monday in May to the first Wednesday in May, and then move the election. So if you were to rescind this vote, my recommendation, or at least my proposal to you, would be to consider the adoption of the proposal of a new bylaw that would set the town meeting and election of town officials.
And so this is what we briefly discussed last week, which was to have annual town meeting on the first Wednesday, annual election on the first Monday, but not have the elected official take office until July 1. And that the incumbents would continue to hold their office until the successor was sworn in, in theory on July 1.
And typically when you have a setup like this, towns will do some form of, and we can have this conversation with the town clerk, they do some form of an inaugural event, something to say that officially all the new elected officials are now in place.
Some sort of like
this, with some delay, may give you one, plans for continuity, that ability to transition knowledge, and then two, may allow you to have some type of ceremonious event like this.
we could do a swearing ceremony.
Yeah.
So this is new this week, gentlemen. I don't know if you have any thoughts. We talked about it last week, but
I don't know if you think that this presentation is okay. I mean, we could just do something sort of like this.
I personally feel like that's easier to read than what we've had historically, which has been difficult to follow sometimes, I think.
Okay.
And I think making it so they're not contingent upon each other, because now the time order is not as necessary because, they'll take office on July 1.
Right.
Makes it just easier to follow when we're going to have our meetings, but that's my feeling.
Okay.
Any concerns with it or questions?
I don't have any problem with the article, Article 27. I guess I think the public may have some concerns as to why we're going back. So I suppose we need to have a good reason to explain why we're kind of flip-flopping. Not that I have a problem with that, but
Right.
Could this use more information, do you think?
That makes sense.
yeah, it looks good to me.
I guess the two things that I would bring up, if we get questions on why change it again or why make any changes, the two reasons behind it, I guess, if you will, that I think that we would want to convey, and I don't know if we want to try to put that in article information just because it might be difficult to convey the message, but would be one, this allows an elected official to complete the fiscal term, right? So it aligns with our fiscal year, and so they serve for the entire fiscal year. Or 3 or 4, 1 or 2, whatever fiscal years, instead of kind of starting a few months before it's over and ending a few months before it's over. So it aligns with our fiscal years. And then the second piece would be to allow us to make changes to elected official compensation on the floor of annual town meeting. Should, oh, Brian, that's not going to work. But hang on, let me finish that thought. Based on our step and grade wage study, our wage system that we've implemented to allow us to make changes to elected town official compensation should a new person be elected to a position to reset that compensation. We can only do that at the annual town meeting. So if we know the results of the elections before the meeting, that allows us to, before the annual town meeting, that allows us to make a change. However, that means we also need to be sure that the annual town meeting always follows the elections. So if the first Monday was after the first Wednesday, this wouldn't work. So I don't know. We could make it the second Wednesday. That would always do that, or we could add the dependent language. I don't know what makes more sense to.
That's a good point.
Because part of this was to have them start on July 1, and the other part was allow us to, if we wish, to match the grade and step system. If
Right.
Someone
With this plan, there'll be some years where the first Wednesday will come after the first Monday, and then others where the Wednesday will happen first.
So we could say the second Wednesday just to keep
Yeah.
it clean. Or we could say the first Wednesday following the first Monday, but I was
Second
kind of in favor of doing away with that that clause.
The second
So-
Wednesday is probably cleaner.
That would be my preference. I don't know what you two think.
Yeah,
I think it'd be.
I'm glad you caught that.
I'm glad we talked through why. But yeah, I don't know if we want to try to put that into the article information. I feel like it might be easier to explain on the floor than I might have to think through it and say it better than I said it tonight. But it may be easier to convey those messages if people ask why or have concerns than trying to put them in article information. But I don't know what if either of you feel differently.
No, I'm just, my only concern is that we have a prepared and developed answer when the question is asked.
I can try to incorporate this rationale into the article information for your review next week and see if you think it meets what you were looking to convey.
If you want to take a stab at it, then I'm fine with that.
Okay.
I'm fine with it as well, Brian.
Okay. I will make these reviews. I'm noticing that I missed one word here. This should say to approve.
Yes.
So I need to change that, so I will fix it as well.
Okay.
Okay, so that was the only other change other than renumbering this Article 28. This is the exact language that you've seen before. And my thought on these two was to put no recommendation because they have not reviewed these.
Mhm.
If you think that that's an appropriate way.
I do, and they're not really financially driven, so usually they don't take position on those historically. So
I will. Should I assume that this may be in a place, I know I have to make a few more revisions that I will make and then send back out to you, that this is in a place where you would want to see a potential clean copy for next week as well? So a mark changes copy and then a clean copy that you could vote on next week? Or do you think that you're going to hold this for a few more weeks?
no, I mean, I think we're ready, pretty much ready to adopt. I don't even know if we need a red line copy next week. We could probably do a final one. I believe really the only substantial change to review would be the article information on this article, right?
Correct. Everything else, it's, I think I caught one or two little things as we were scanning through. So it will just be making these adjustments highlighted here and explained here. So prepare you a clean copy for next week with next week's date on it.
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
And that will give us a week, because next week will be the 13th. That will give us a couple days to print off copies, and that sort of keeps us on that 4-week. Actually, it gives us a little extra time.
Mhm.
That will give us almost 6 weeks to let the residents have time with it. And we won't have to race to print these off. So that will be good for all parties, because usually it's a mad dash to get this printed, sorted, and out to the voters. So excellent. Okay.
We also usually send the budget summary too, right? So we have a
They
few weeks
usually
to
go out
finish
about the
that.
same week. Yeah. Okay. Okay, I will get that all to you guys.
Excellent. All right. Next item on the agenda, the final review or third review of the reconciliation policy. Any questions, concerns, anything anybody saw that they wanted to discuss before we adopt?
I'm fine.
I didn't see anything.
Okay. Well, I'll make a motion that we adopt the reconciliations policy effective or approved April 6, 2020.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
6.
Next item on our agenda was discussion of the reuse of the former library building. I would expect there's still some work to be done around that at this point, unless you have any further updates at the moment, Brian, but I know we'll probably be slow going at this point to evaluate what may need to be done in the short term.
My understanding is that the building has been cleaned out at this time. I believe that was completed at least a week or two ago. And at this point, everything's been on hold because of the current situations. I have relayed back out to Public Works that we're going to revisit this in July. And Mariah and I will be working on that communication out to the school department and the recreation department to begin getting an assessment of what their needs are in preparation for that July meeting. And also include the project for a feasibility study for the Public Works office will also include this as a site. So we're working on those pieces.
I think at this point, unless either of you have concerns, probably makes sense to table that topic until the July meetings and table any temporary reuse by Public Works until some of the current emergency orders are lifted, because I don't really feel it's a good time to be trying to move people or have people working on moving things around right now. It's not the best environment to be tasking with that kind of work.
Agreed.
Agreed.
So we'll take it off the agenda until either we are in a better place to be doing that kind of work, or we're ready to do some of the joint meetings about needs and talking through that with Union 28 and the Recreation Commission.
Okay,
Review of the highway superintendent position description. We had some good discussion last week on this one. Had some further edits. We'll take a look at those and see if
down
there's
in the knowledge section.
anything else. Yep, there.
And then there's some additional changes on the next page that when you're ready, I'll scroll to.
I'm good with that language.
I as well.
Okay, and then the last change, it's very similar. You'd wanted the municipal water treatment removed. Same sort of statement that was in the statement above. And then we removed the reference to graders because we don't have gravel roads.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that paragraph as well.
And those are the only changes.
Anything else we wanted to review in this, or are we ready to adopt it as our highway superintendent job description?
Ready to adopt?
Good to go.
Make a motion, I guess, that we make it formal. I'll make a motion that we approve the highway superintendent job description as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Right. Next topic was question, Brad?
Sorry, I was talking out loud and I realized the mic was still on.
No worries.
Myself.
So I'm usually on mute. No. The next topic was one we covered in detail last week and had the presentation around property assessed clean energy, the PACE program. Did everyone have some more time to review that that document and the details around that program?
I did.
Did anyone have any further questions? Did you feel like it made sense to be something we adopt, or what were your thoughts?
I think it's a good program, and we've as residential owners, we've used and have worked in the last few years with Mass Save as well. So I think anything we can do to, and I know it was brought up, I think, in the last meeting that by Jackie, Jackie Boyden, the assessor, that Irving Paper Mill was interested in doing some solar investment as well, and I think it helps our commercial businesses and anyone looking to come in, as well as being an advantage to the IP plant in the future.
I agree.
So I'm clearly in favor.
Pete, did you have any questions or concerns?
No, I have no concerns at all. I think this looks good.
So if I recall, there's a process for us to formally adopt this program, which was near the end. So we have this resolution that we would need to adopt. I can read the whole resolution. My preference would be to vote to adopt the resolution as written, unless you would like me to dictate it.
I thought last week Brian indicated that we had to clearly adopt that passage, so is that correct, Brian, or what?
So the resolution here is what I need to have into the record. So if you would like to instruct me to commit this
Oh, you
to the
only need that section? I can read that, I mean, if you'd like.
Yeah, I mean, the rest of this are just whereas statements, but here's the resolution is right here. The town of Irving is to the Board of Selectmen.
Okay. So, whereas now therefore be it resolved as follows, the Board of Selectmen of the town of Irving hereby approves the municipality participating in PACE, Massachusetts pursuant to the PACE Act, and authorizes the town administrator to enter into PACE, Massachusetts Municipal Assessment and Assignment Agreement, the agreement, with Mass Development, pursuant to which the municipality will agree to to 1, levy PACE betterment assessments and impose PACE betterment assessment liens on benefited properties located in the municipality in the amounts determined by Mass Development to be sufficient to repay the PACE financing. 2, assign the PACE betterment assessment liens to Mass Development, which Mass Development may in turn assign to the providers of the PACE financing, each a capital provider, as collateral for such PACE financing. 3, include on the property tax bills for the benefited properties the installment payments necessary to repay the PACE betterment assessments in the amounts and at the times as determined by Mass Development. 4, collect and pay to Mass Development or its designee the PACE betterment assessment installment payments as and when collected. And 5, enforce to the extent required by the agreement the PACE betterment assessments and liens. The agreement to be substantially in the form presented to this meeting with such changes, modifications, and insertions as the town administrator may approve as being in the best interest of the municipality. The collector treasurer of the town or such other town agency as may be designated in the agreement is authorized to levy such PACE betterment assessments and impose the PACE betterment assessment liens on behalf of the town without further authorization by this legislative body. Notwithstanding any other provisions of law to the contrary, officers and officials of the municipality, including without limitation, municipal tax assessors and tax collectors, are not personally liable to Mass Development or to any other person for claims of whatever kind or nature under or related to PACE, Massachusetts, including, without limitation, claims for or related to uncollected PACE betterment assessments. Other than fulfillment of the obligations specified in the agreement, the municipality has no liability to the owner of the benefited property or to any capital provider related to the municipality's participation in PACE, Massachusetts. All those in favor of the aforesaid resolution?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
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 Okay. Thank you. We will notify Mass Development that the town has adopted the PACE program. We will finalize this resolution documentation and send it over to them. And it sounds like you're officially a PACE community.
Excellent. Please also pass on our thanks to the principal assessor and the planning assistant for working on this and bringing it forth.
Absolutely. And we'll work with Mass Development. I think they were shooting for this springtime of 2020. I'm sure with everything going on, everything's delayed, but we will work with Mass Development on a promotional communication that we can send out to our commercial businesses to let them know that this opportunity now exists and where they can learn more information. We'll also add it to the town website.
Excellent. All right, the next item of business we had was an Irving business license application. It's for, I actually have to blow this up so I can read it better. Oh, there you go. Applicant is Thomas Duffy, and is that, forgive my reading that, is it D and W or is it DFW? DFW?
ENW, I believe.
D and W.
Okay, thank you. Doing business as D&W Services. This is for lawn care.
Correct.
So I'll make a motion that we issue a business license to Thomas Duffy, DBA D&W Services for lawn care.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any other business? Did I? No, maybe I'm not. Let me go back to my agenda here. These 2-page agendas are catching me off guard.
Not my favorite, that's for sure.
I guess that is the end of it.
Let me just double check.
Make sure I didn't miss anything.
Let's see. I was looking to see if I could find from. Oh, I got the. Guess that's it for right now. I thought I had one more thing. My apologies.
Okay. Any other anything else for this evening? Anything for next meeting? Next meeting we'll likely be looking at we'll look at the ATM final, and then we'll also potentially look at a budget document draft and the revisit the library building project and where we're at and all the open item, any and all open items regarding that at this point. Any other business for next week?
I have nothing, Jake.
No, I don't have anything.
You originally wanted to return to the draft revisions of the personnel policy in April. With everything going on, I have not been able to afford the time to that really requires. So if we were to be able to move that towards the end of the month, is that acceptable?
Yeah, this was continuing discussion around the wage implementation, right? Beyond the actual just step and grade.
Well, yeah, we had the 3-pronged approach to our big project, and the compensation was just one piece of it. The overhaul of the personnel policy was something that we had been working on with the department heads through the fall, and we put that on hold to push the compensation part through. And then when you all voted on the compensation, we said we'd revisit it in April and begin your review of all of the recommended revisions. And I just need to finish editing that document and putting it together.
Yeah, that's fine. We also need to talk further about the other, even compensation and policy related items that were uncovered and brought up during that effort as well.
Right.
Just for the board's information, the codification has been continuing to progress. They came back with lots of data to work through and recommendations and thoughts and questions about how we want to potentially modify or change how different bylaws and such are adopted. So I'm going to work through that document with the administrative team and legal, and then hopefully trim that down to something more manageable, and then we can pull in any department heads, elected officials as appropriate to review, and then the board can kind of go through that recommendations document and then make some decisions around what we may want to change, if anything, and continue that process. But it's moving along. Quite a lot of work there going on in the background. So, oh, meeting minutes. We did not have any for this evening, but we'll have some in the future.
I'm halfway done with those, so I'll have those to you shortly. Can I just make you aware of one more thing?
Yes.
We were notified Friday afternoon that construction along Route 63 will resume this week. So the work that had ended in the fall right around the railroad tracks will resume. It's scheduled to start this Wednesday on the 8th, and it's scheduled to work its way down Leicester Street So we will be working with MassDOT to go over the plans again, because it's been several months and there were a few concerns and issues. Also, we've now had an entire winter with the work that had been completed, and there were a few problem areas that came to light throughout the winter. So we will address that with the team, and then we'll work with the residents, because obviously there's been a long pause, and so to make them aware of the work going forward. And of course, the team working under MassDOT's review or oversight has reviewed all of the COVID-19 guidance. So the crew that will be working out there is familiar with the expectations, and will be practicing those precautions.
I think Brian and I discussed this, and we'll put something up on the website as well, and potentially social media, advising the public that they are doing the work and they are aware of the restrictions and are working with state guidance on how to do it safely. So just knowing that people may have concerns, wondering why that's continuing, or being concerned if it's safe. So that's, if anything right now, sidewalks are more important, as people have limited exposure outside their homes. So I think as much as it sounds concerning, it's a good project to get wrapped up right now. So we'll put something out there this week.
Could I ask Brian,
Yes, sir.
as far as safety equipment, do all of our staff and departments have N95s on hand and gloves and anything that an individual might need if they were to take advantage of that in the course of their duties?
So every department has access to PPE. What that looks like in every department may change a little bit, but everybody has access to sanitizing for their workspace, their desks, for their cruisers, whatever apparatus they're working on. Each employee has access to gloves. We've had those in stock. The N95 masks are the limited item that we're starting to see a little bit more of, but that is a finite supply. And so I know that the department heads and Chief Wonka in particular, who's been trying to source some of these, have been talking about how to use that supply as strategically as possible to make sure that we can last. But yes, we do have those items.
Okay.
I don't want to speak for the EMD, but I think the current recommendation from the last public safety emergency management discussion that we had was the items are available, and at the moment, recommendations internally for use are, if there's going to be a public interaction that is within the social distancing guidelines, for their protection. So they are available for that, should they need to have them. And frankly, there are limits on those supplies, right? Same as everywhere in the nation. But we do currently have some. And I know Chief Wonka is regularly reviewing our levels with all the departments and trying to also procure more supplies so that we have a bigger reserve.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any other items?
All ahead, gentlemen.
Okay. Well, then I think that that's a wrap for this evening. I'll make a motion that we adjourn the Board of Selectmen meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you,
Thank you,
gentlemen.
gentlemen.
Thank
You're
you,
welcome.
everyone. Have a good evening.
Okay.
Pete, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Are you in your house?
Yes, I am. Every Monday night, I'm going to a different area.
A different room every week.
I just wanted to ask that because I know you weren't set up for that. So I was wondering where you are.
Oh yeah. I have a little Wi-Fi hotspot now, and I'm good.
Oh, excellent. Good.
Right. So it makes it easy.
He's moved into the 21st century as internet home now.
Well, I don't know about that. we're working on it. It beats sitting in my car, on a rainy day trying to do work. So
There are outside Stop and Shop or,
yeah, yeah, good.
okay.
Good night, guys.
All
Good
right.
night.
Thanks,
All
everyone.
right.
Good night.
Thanks. See you guys later. Good night.